Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. The question I'm asking here is, how is urban logistics treated in urban planning? My background is as a planner. I'm working as a university professor now for planners, for land use and transportation planners, and I've lived a long life as a land use and city planner and transportation planner. So this is why I'm also interested in urban logistics and in urban freight. And I'm interested in how we handle it in plans. Why do we have still problems with urban freight, for instance, and why can't we solve them in plans? So I've started a project which is still ongoing, and I'm presenting it now as also as a cry for help. If some of you have suggestions or could point to areas where I should also have a look, then I would be happy for that. So let me then try to continue presenting if it all works. Did it? Yes. Well, my background makes me see it this way. We gradually understand more about the requirements and the functions of urban freight. And this is a field of transport mostly. It's also about organizing, of course, but for the transport part, it needs access, it needs capacity and maneuverability, like any other transport field. And it needs minimized conflicts, and this happens in areas where space and capacity are becoming scarce resources. So urban freight finds itself squeezed very often between other interests. But that is in fact the situation for many actors and stakeholders that operates in the city. They can't decide everything for themselves. They are part of a system. And that is what plans are for. Very often we believe that the main reason for planning is because we want things done, but that's not the main reason for planning. Then we could only do it. Actually, the reason for planning is instead that we seek to reduce conflicts between, for instance, those who gain and those who lose from the impact of getting things done. And we do that by thinking in advance, or trying to think in advance. And sometimes we do it by launching our ideas through the formal systems of public planning. So then I ask, is the planning system ready for urban logistics? And now I'm pointing mostly to the Norwegian system, but I'm also planning to enhance this project and go abroad. So let's see what can happen. From a legislation point of view, there could be at least two ways to include freight in city planning. The first point is if we mention freight and other urban logistics topics among our standard list of planned purposes and land use objectives that we find in the legislation, in the Planning and Building Act. That's the same way as streets and parking areas and bike lanes and sidewalks and so on are specified in the Planning and Building Act now. That could be the case, or it could be mentioned among the topics that require special consideration when we plan in an urban area. That's like how we treat noise and pollution and access for people with disabilities and traffic safety and so on, how we treat them now. But none of these are met in the Norwegian legislation, and why not? That's a question I ask. I'm looking for the answer. And why is it of importance that it's mentioned? Well, it could affect the priorities of those responsible for planning or for making decisions. When these topics are on a checklist, and that is what we very often see in the Planning and Building Act, it's a bunch of checklists to to go through when we do planning. It has to be looked into as a result of that. And since I'm also teaching planning, I'm interested in bringing it into the planning education. And this, by having it in the legislation, you also have to put it into the planning education. So that could also be a point. So this is about this is a short presentation of examples from Trondheim and Oslo, two Norwegian cities. How is urban freight brought into planning? How is it treated in planning? So this project is quite pragmatic. I think I have to move something on my screen. It's a pragmatic how and why project. I don't go deep into the theory here. What I do in this first phase, I single out plans for plots with grocery and food shops, site plans that is, because these would presumably need freight solutions. So I've concentrated on two Norwegian cities, but I have ambitions to expand the scope to other Norwegian cities and also abroad if possible. So if you have any suggestions, fine. I want to compare legislation and I want to compare practical results also from planning. So the question I ask is freight or logistics solution part of the plans I investigate? Are they mentioned at all? And a possible next step in the research is also to see what happened between the site plan, when it was approved, for instance, and the physical results. Did planning, in fact, solve the problems? And in some cases, why not? So we want to find out if and how urban freight occurs as a topic in plans. I sampled in a total of 94 plans so far, 50 in Trondheim, 44 in Oslo, but I'm expanding when, well, the pandemic is over. And it's the groceries and foods that are important for the sampling criteria here. What did I then find so far? What have I found? Well, as you see, perhaps there is a majority of the plans, the site plans, even those plans that include shopping areas or grocery shops and so on, and just a minority where plans are including freight, any measure for freight, any physical solution, for instance. They are mentioned in Oslo just in 15 cases out of 44, and in Trondheim in 21 cases out of 50 plans. So mentioned means that they are either part of the text provisions or regulations, the written regulations, or that they are also drawn in the maps following the plan. The sum of 15 and 9 is 24, and of course there is some overlap here. In Oslo, it's the text provisions that dominate. Only in one case there was something in the map, a solution in the map. And in some cases there are only very general recommendations on the, well, this one represents it in a way: goods deliveries must be solved. And that is not much of a plan, but at least it's mentioned. And in both the cities, there seems, when I study the content of the plan, there seems to be no stable practice for how the issue is presented in the plan. Is it a part of the transportation and traffic issues in general? Is it a consideration regarding the operation of the business? Is it parking? And that it's not clear how the cities are thinking then. When do plans include something about urban logistics and when do they not? Well, what we could observe in Trondheim was there is no difference between plans really close to the city center and plans towards the outskirts of the city. There's a slight tendency of freight mentioned more often near the city center, but it's probably not significant with so few observations. We could also observe that it's more usual that plans in dense areas include something about freight, and that could be due to the lack of capacity or lack of area. So that freight problems need more often to be solved in a plan in a dense area. We could also observe that this is the most important variable to explain inclusion of freight in the city plan, and that is perhaps not so it's not a surprise. It's the age of the plan. The plans, according to the very old Planning and Building Act from 1966, almost none mention freight. In the other end, a majority, in fact, includes freight. So that is the important. That's the important information here and observation here. And that tendency is the same in both cities. Did the plans show the solution, the physical solutions? Well, in Oslo, never, almost never. Just a few examples of that. I found one among my 44 plans. In Trondheim, that is more frequent. 9 out of 21 plans also describe this in the map. So there is hope then for planning being an important part of the solution. I've also tried to look into general plans on the oversight level, municipal master plans, sub-plans, and so on. And also some general sectorial plans and street use plans and plans for city squares and urban meeting places. All these seem to include freight consideration more often now than they did earlier. So the question I'm asking myself then is, over time, does this trickle down to site planning and to the practical solutions? And I'm trying to find out. This, I think, was the finishing slide. Thank you.